You're listening to episode 97 on the Air Hug Community Podcast. Hello there and welcome or welcome back. If you are new here, this is the Air Hug Community Podcast and I am your host, Judy Arazosa. I am a midlife lady who is someone who loves to share stories from myself and special guests that reflect on just how midlife really goes, not how we think it should go. We talk about the good, the bad, the messy, the ugly, the wonderful, all the emotions. And this is a place where we actually can grow from our experiences. So welcome. I'm glad you're here. Let's get started. All right, let's get started. I want to talk about something today that has me a little bit worried, and it's actually had me do a big about face in how I've actually approached healthy living. And I want to start talking about, leading up to this, about girl time. I really enjoy girlfriend time, and I think most of us can agree. Most of the people listening to this are women, but if you're not, I think you can all agree that everybody needs friends, and it really actually doesn't matter if they're male or female. But in this case, I just want to refer to something that I really noticed with time together with women, and I actually notice it more with when a lot of women are gathered. And I want to just say that some people might say, but Judy, people might talk to you about this because you're in the health and nutrition and fitness, arena. But actually, I don't think that's the reason I see this coming up a lot, because I can be in a group of people and people don't actually know that much about me, and I just will still listen and it will still come up. So I notice a very common conversation topic, and I don't even know if it depends on life stage or not, but it's not the entire topic of conversation. But if we're gathered for a while, I noticed that probably more than 70% of the time it comes up in conversation, and I'm wondering if you're guessing what that can be. It's talking about some type of dietary restraint. And there's actually a term called cognitive dietary restraint. And this comes up a lot. And it's disturbing, right? First of all, what is it? It's basically women talking about their perceived ongoing effort to limit dietary intake to manage body weight. And I started looking up a few studies because this is becoming really interesting to me, like why. I thought maybe it was just me, that's something I've been interested in my whole life. I try not to really actually talk about it too much outside of work, to be honest with you. But I just noticed that it comes up in a lot of conversations. And so I looked up and I came up with a few studies. And one study in particular talked about postmenopausal women, because they wanted to know if postmenopausal women versus other ages of women actually had effects of dietary restraint compared to other ages. And so what they found in this study was that, first of all, high cognitive dietary restraint, and they had a way to define it. I'm not going to go in that, but they did have a way to define high cognitive dietary restraint versus low cognitive dietary restraint. And what they found was that no matter what your age, first of all, there were two issues. I'm not going to get to that no matter what your age thing yet. There were two issues that popped up consistently in women who have high cognitive dietary restraint. So they're thinking about dieting, like they have a high incidence of thinking about dieting and how it affects their body weight. Like it's constantly on their mind, or much higher than those with low. And the two issues that came up the most that were associated, and this is not the only study, by the way, there are several of them, but one is they have a high excretion of cortisol, which is stress hormone. And that's something that can be measured in urine, which they did in this study. And then the other thing is they have a low bone mass, lower than people with lower cognitive dietary restraint. And this to me was very disturbing, especially because I will say, listen, with the amount that you see women talking about diet plans, it's kind of unnerving to realize that people with high dietary restraint are going to actually be suffering more from stress. And the thing with stress is, and I don't know if you've heard me talk about this before, but you can actually stress yourself fat. So you can actually hold on to extra body fat if your body is perceived to being in a lot of stress, because it goes back to our prehistoric times when we were in stress. We needed to save up because we didn't know where the next meal was come from. So our bodies are wired that way. When we have high stress or stress hormone excretion, it's going to be actually harder to lose fat. And if the cause of that is coming from a diet and we're actually eating less, it's crazy because you can actually be maybe not eating so much, but still producing a lot of stress hormone, and so the fat will not come off your body. The other thing is that low bone mass, nobody wants that, all right? So, doggone it, right? It's like the more I'm learning and reading and researching about diets, the more I want to throw them out the window, And I know people are like, well, all right, great, that's great if you're not overweight. What are you going to do? And here's the thing, and I'm going to be doing another episode on this down the line, but I really want to do a little bit more research first. But if we would just learn to pay attention to our hunger and fullness signals, and I know just is it's a big just, right? Like that's part of the problem, but I think that diets make us dumber. Diets make us not in tune with our actual hunger and fullness cues. And we have been, as women, learning this for so many decades and years that at some point we don't even know how to eat anymore. But I want to back up, because the most interesting thing about this study was that it wasn't age. When they controlled for age, there was no difference. Or maybe I'm not saying that right. There was no difference no matter what age you were. So anyone with high cognitive dietary restraint was actually suffering from higher stress hormone and lower bone density. So it's not a problem of just young girls. Kind of like when we talked about body image a couple episodes ago. It's not a problem specific to young girls or women in their 20s or 30s or 40s or women in their 60s or 70s. It was just as common across the board for all ages. And so, gosh, that makes me sad and worried, because I know the diet industry is a huge industry, and damn, they are really good at enticing us and tempting us to learn that we can lose weight fast. And the problem is we can't, So it just suggests, it's a really strong suggestion too, that dieting actually increases your stress hormones. And of course, there are a lot of problems with having a high amount of stress, right? Now, there's a good side to stress too, and I think I should, to be fair, probably follow this up with an episode on the good side and upside of stress. But in this case, it's not. And so if you are struggling with trying to figure out how to have a right-sized body, and by right-sized body, I don't mean a body size dictated by any particular industry. I mean a body size that is healthy. And by the way, you can have a little bit more or less fat. The range of healthy can come at a very big range of sizes. But if you're living with constant stress hormone output, that is not healthy. Even if you maybe look very, what I'm going to say, healthy. So I think there's a lot that has to be thought about here, especially, rethinking what we think a healthy sized body is, and rethinking At what cost do you want a body that looks good? Because a body that looks good is not necessarily a body that is healthy. And by the way, looking good, of course, is a function of how you feel about yourself, not how others feel about you. And that's a very important point to think about. So I wanted to bring this up because I really want you to marinate on this and think about, when the next time you're tempted to drop 2 dress sizes because someone's doing a challenge, or to do a 21-day fix, or some other challenge, like you're going to give up chocolate. Did I ever tell you about the time I gave up chocolate? I'm sure I've mentioned this before, but I've definitely done all these things wrong, just like everyone else. At one point in time, I was so fixated on chocolate. I'm sure this came after Christmas, because I remember starting it around the first of the year, and I had decided for a couple of months that I was going to give up chocolate. And I had planned the day that I was going to have chocolate. I know I talked about this before, but I'm going to just speed it up. The day that I went back to eating chocolate, I ate so much chocolate. In fact, we were doing a wine tasting that night that I didn't even taste the wine. I was so sick from the chocolate that it totally backfired on me. So, of course, the more you draw a line in the sand, the more you're going to want to cross it. And so the more and more I see this happening, and I've seen this with people I've worked with, I've experienced it over years and years and years, I just feel like maybe it's time to learn or relearn to eat the way we were born. And that is, babies stop when they're full. And usually if they're force-fed more, little babies will end up throwing up anyway. They'll do a lot of spit up. And a toddler who's left to their own devices will not overeat or undereat. It may seem like it at a meal or two, but it's not how it is per meal. It's basically how it averages out over time. So, and that's the same way with us. Maybe one day we want all the vegetables, and maybe another day we want a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, But when we get caught in all the shoulds that we think we should do, it really kind of blunts our own natural instincts. And I would love for us to get back to listening to our own natural instincts about eating to somewhat fullness, just satisfied, and redefining your definition of satisfaction. Satisfaction is not eating all the chocolate you want. It's eating just enough. Right? And satisfaction might be a day after that, really craving a beautiful salad with vegetables or whatever. So this is food for thought. Is this where I get to say pun intended? Diets are not all they're cracked up to be. And I think that it's time as women, we need to stop being so obsessed with food and just think about health first, and not listen to these for-profit institutions that are there to actually make us dependent on their diets. So I hope this got you thinking. No disrespect to anyone for any choices on eating, because I think so many different approaches can work. And what is the best way to eat for you? It's the way that you can eat with the least amount of anxiety and stress and obsession. So, and gosh darn it, this is probably a huge work in progress for people who have been dieting for most of their life, but it actually can be done. If you have any questions and you'd like to chat further about this personally, feel free to reach out to me. I'll put something in the show notes and we can do a quick little nutrition chat. So anyways, we are going to be talking more about this, and I do expect to be doing a future episode on the upside of stress, just to be fair, because we know that some stress is good, too much stress is not good, and I don't think anybody lives in a life without stress. I think at that point they would probably be dead. So anyways, ta-ta for now. I will see you on the next episode of the Air Hug Community Podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and please do me a favor. If you are on Apple or Spotify, please leave a review so that other people can find this podcast as well.